Grab a note sheet and let's jump into our discussion. This week we get to come back to the life of Joshua. I mentioned to you last week that Joshua is one of my favorite people in the Bible. Love studying his life. There's something about this guy that just really resonates. It's a really good teaching tool God uses in my life, I think, and so it's been greatly beneficial for me, and I hope that's going to translate for you today. We're not going to really maybe as much be engaging his life as a particular event that took place to see how God was working in that situation. Last week, you may remember, we talked about him getting the call from God. God saying, Joshua, my servant Moses is dead, and you're the guy. You're the one that's going to lead my children right into the land that I've promised them. You may remember for 40 years they've been wandering around out in the desert. And they did that because their parents, their grandparents had rebelled against God. And now it's time. Now they get that opportunity. And I can imagine that Joshua was probably a little bit intimidated by that. There was probably a little bit of fear. Moses wasn't there anymore. He was the one that met with God face to face. And now all of a sudden it's up to him. He's got to lead this people in, this griping, complaining group of people, 2-3 million strong. He's got to somehow lead them into the promised land. And of course we know that somehow was his dependence upon God. That's what this study today is all about. Just how God was showing the people how desperately dependent they were to be upon him. When we get to chapter 2, we watch in chapter 1 as God encourages. We saw that last week. As we get to chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5, we see now God preparing the people for this entrance. He moves them into the promised land. He has the Jordan River stand up on its ends, and they walk right across into this land. I mean, this is unheard of. The people in the land hear that as well. They become very nervous. We'll see that unfolding as we move forward in just a few minutes. But there was a lot of intimidation. God had to prepare the people for what they were about to do. He had to get them ready. And so he said, I want you to consecrate yourself. I want to set yourself apart. Make yourself holy for that which is coming. It's kind of like what we do when we're going to take the Lord's Supper. You remember what Paul told us to do? He said, examine yourself. Look at your life. Make sure your life is what it should be so that you can be prepared and ready to take this act of communion, this act before God, this which God desires for you to do on a regular basis. The same was true for the children of Israel. You got to get ready for what's about to happen. You've got to get prepared to enter into this promised land. We see when they go up against the city of Jericho that they are ready. God brings about a great victory. When the second city they approach, Ai, which last week I attributed under Moses' leadership, which was a mistake for me. It was certainly under Joshua's leadership. That second city, we see that there was a distinct difference in this first city and the second, in that the first city they were right with God, and the second city, when they came up against the little small village of people, they were just going to wipe them out and move on. There was sin in the camp, and as a result, they lost the battle, and some of their warriors were killed. Big difference. God's telling them, you got to get ready for this. You've got to prepare yourself for what's coming. When we come to the bottom of chapter 5, we see that something unusual takes place. The angel of the Lord appears to Joshua. Now, Joshua doesn't know it's the angel of the Lord. He's never met face to face with him. All he sees is that there's someone standing outside the camp with his sword drawn. And he, being inquisitive, he walks out. Probably there was a group of men with him. He walks out to the stranger. He says to him, are you for us or are you against us? Now, something you need to know, when the Bible says it is the angel of the Lord, it's always talking about Jesus Christ. When it's talking about an angel of the Lord, it could be any of the host of heaven's armies. But when it's very specific, the angel of the Lord, it's talking about Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ had come to see Joshua. And Joshua said, are you for us or are you against us? And I love his response. No. I mean, if you just look at that from a logical standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Are you for us or are you against us? There's no real no answer can be given. You've got to say, okay, yes, I'm for you, or I am against you. But Jesus said no. In other words, the right question for you to ask is, are you on my side? My side's the one that matters. Your side doesn't matter. The other side doesn't matter. My side's the one that matters. You better line up with what I'm doing here. Come then to chapter 6. People are in the land. Base camp is set up. They're not a very long distance from Jericho. They're ready to go and engage Jericho in battle. And God begins to lay out the plan. In fact, number one, if you're taking notes, I wish you'd jot this down. We see the unexpected method of this. The unexpected method. This entire study is called unexpected because God works through the unexpected. God, especially in this story, we're going to see it unfold very clearly before our eyes. It is the unexpected. But I want you to understand that God also works through the unexpected in our lives. There's no cookie-cutter model for God when it comes to dealing with mankind. It's not that He says, okay, here's the way I deal with man. It's always going to be the same. You've got to fit into this box. No, God may be dealing in my life through a success. He may be working to grow me and develop me through a success that's happening in my life. While someone else who's equally in love with God, follows Jesus Christ, someone else, He may be working in their life through tragedy. I mean, He may be trying to grow both of us, but doing it through different means. God works in different ways. It's not always the same. God begins to lay out the unexpected plan, the unexpected method by which the children of Israel were going to engage the enemy. And I want you to follow along with me. I'm going to interrupt the reading as we move through in order to comment on it, just to give us a running narrative of what my thoughts are on this. This is certainly, I don't believe, Joshua's thoughts, but I think from a human perspective, it's important for us to see, well, this is possibly what we would have been doing. Because as God deals in our lives in different ways, what we have a tendency to do is say, God, that's not the way this ought to be done. I mean, it could really be handled differently here, don't you think, God? And God's saying, listen, I deal in unexpected ways in order to bring about what's best in your life. So follow along with me. Chapter 6 of the book of Joshua, verses 1 through 5. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. Let's pause for just a second. So the people of Jericho heard that the children of Israel have now crossed into the land. You remember, if you've read much of the story prior to chapter 6, I believe it's in chapter 4, Moses sends two spies into Jericho to kind of get the lay of the land, to fill things out. And when they go into the house of Rahab. Rahab tells them, we are scared to death of you. And we're petrified of you. We've heard about how God is with you. We know that God's given you this land, and we are scared to death of what's going to take place. Now we see that in action because they get word that the children of Israel have come into their territory. They're not far from them. And what do? They send out a message. Listen, if you're outside the city, you better get back in because we're about to close the doors. And when we shut the gates, we're going to seal it up so tightly. No one's coming in, no one's going out. If you're out there when the gates are shut, you better go find you a place to hide because the children of Israel are coming. You better go somewhere because you're not coming in here. And so we follow now verse 2. The Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and its mighty men of valor. I think, from my perspective, as I look at this and I think about it, I just think, God, the city is sealed. And this is a massively walled city. This isn't, a little fence that runs between neighbors. This is a massive, it's such a great wall that people have built their houses in the wall. I mean, that's how thick this thing is. For the children of Israel believe that they're just going to march in and knock this thing down and be done with it. It is really a misunderstanding of facts. They're not going to do that. And so God says the city's sealed up. See, that's a notation. You need to understand I've given you that city. I might have thought, how do you get that out of that? Verse 3. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. And this you shall do for 6 days. Okay, so this is where we get in, from a human perspective, an absurd method of warfare. I mean, this is just off the charts in ridiculous. If you're just looking at this from a human perspective, you got to step back and say, that makes no sense whatsoever. So Joshua is ready. I mean, God has talked to him in chapter 1. He's got him excited now about following him. God's going to be with him. God's going to protect him. God's going to never forsake him. He's going to be there. And Joshua's ready now to go into the land. He's got the people sanctified. They're ready. They're ready to go to battle. And God then lays it out, the plan, this unexpected plan. He says, what I want you to do is I want you to get all of your men of war, get them in a line, Joshua. And Joshua, yes, what's coming next? What's coming next? And I want you to march around the city one time. And that's all you're going to do that first day. Joshua could have possibly thought, what? That's the battle plan? Okay, maybe God, you're wanting us to spy it out and get a feel for the vulnerable places in the city where we can invade. Okay, I get it. And then God said, in the second day, I want you to line up your men of war, and I want you to march around the city. And that's it for day 2. And Joshua may have thought, God, what are you telling us to do here? This is not what we were expecting. I mean, we were looking to go engage in hand-to-hand combat. We want to relieve some of this frustration. Why are you just having us march around? Okay, maybe we missed something the first day, and so we'll spot it the second. Okay, we'll get it. And then God said, so the third day, I want you to do the same thing. And the 4th day, and the 5th day, and the 6th day. If Joshua had been like me, he would have probably been thinking, this is crazy. This is crazy. God, you're God. I know that. I've seen you do incredible things, but this plan just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And then God would have said, but then the 7th. Oh, okay, here it comes. Joshua's getting excited again. God's got, okay, he's getting us ready. 7th day's coming. What do you got for us on the 7th day? Well, on the 7th day, I want you to line up your men of war, and I want you to go around the city 7 times. But then on that 7th time, here's the plan. Here's the part we've been waiting for, Joshua's thinking. I want you, when you hear the trumpets blow, I want you to start yelling. What? You want me to start yelling? Okay, God. Now, Joshua may or may not have had an issue with this. I don't know. I really think that Joshua was so tight with God that he probably just followed without question. What a blessing it would be to be in that position. I mean, what a remarkable, refreshing blessing it would be for us just to be to that place to where whatever God calls us to go through, whatever he calls us to face, we just say, okay, God, we're following you. You've got this. You lead where you want to go. But the problem for a lot of us is that we're creatures of habit. We really enjoy knowing what to expect. We don't really want to face the unexpected, and why not? The unexpected brings about a lack of control. If I don't know what to expect, I don't know how to prepare. There's no control for me here. And if I don't know how to prepare, then it's a lack of opportunity for recognition, because I can't prepare properly. I don't know how to be ready for this battle. All I know is that you've got me walking around a wall 7 times on the 7th day, and that makes no sense to me. And I just stopped to think about myself. And maybe you could do the same this morning. Stop and say, you know what? What's God got me going through right now that doesn't make sense in my life? What are you facing right now in your life? Whether it's good or it's bad or you just don't know what to make of it. What are you facing in your life right now that needs some clarification for your thoughts? Just don't get it, God. Maybe God is directing our hearts through the first part of this study to say, you know what, God, you are God. I know you've got my best interest at heart. I know you work for two reasons in the life of a child of God that loves you, and that is for our good and for your glory. And so as a result, I don't like it. I don't enjoy what I'm going through, maybe. But I trust you to say, okay, God, you lead, and I'm just going to blindly follow just as you desire. I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. So we see then the unexpected method, which brings us to the unexpected reality. For the children of Israel, I can imagine their reality after hearing this plan was to think different things. Maybe, first of all, they would have thought, that's a crazy plan. I don't see how that's going to benefit anything. I mean, how in the world is marching around a city going to destroy our enemy? It might get us humiliated. It might get us mocked. But how is it going to defeat them? I don't know. It's beyond me. I don't know. Maybe they were thinking, well, where's the fun in doing it that way? I mean, for 40 years, they've been wandering around in the desert. They've got all this pent-up anger and frustration over what their parents did that kept them from getting in the promised land 40 years earlier. And now they've got to go and confront it. Should have been their parents that dealt with this, but no, now they've got to go and deal with it. And they're ready for some action. They're wanting to release some of that hostility that's pent up. They're wanting to get into some action. And God's saying, you're going to march around the wall. Oh, my goodness. Where's the fun in that? Maybe they're thinking, okay, there's no glory in that for us. I mean, we're about to invade this land. We're about to go in and fight people that are much better equipped and prepared for war than we are. We've got to have the intimidation factor on our side. We really need those people to be somewhat scared of us when we get there. And yet, God, what they're going to find out is not that we're great warriors, but that we're really good marchers. I mean, where's the benefit in that, God? Where's the benefit in it? Maybe they were thinking, well, where's the logic in doing it this way? You see, if you read on further down past verse 5, you see that God said, this city is set apart for me. So first fruits for you. You're going to go into the land, the first city you conquered, everything is set aside for me. You're not to take anything out of the city, not the gold, not the silver, not the garments, not the furnishings, whatever it is. You are to leave it right there. It's not for you. It's for me. And maybe they were thinking, God, if this is a wealthy people, if we go in and take what we want, we're set for life. I mean, we can fill our houses with gold and silver. We won't have to work. Why would we leave that behind? That doesn't make sense. The reality of what they were facing is that God's thoughts are not ours. Isaiah tells us that, chapter 55 and verse 8. My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. It's very important that we come to the place we understand, you know what, I've got my thoughts, I've got my plans, I've got the way I believe things should flow, but the reality is God's way is always best. And why is that? Why is it that God would take us through things that are unexpected? Well, maybe it could be because if I'm doing it my way, if I'm following my plan, if I'm following the path that I see most appropriate for the situation, then when it's all said and done, if anything good comes out of that, I'm the one that gets the glory. It's all about me. Look at what I've done. For the children of Israel, had they gone in and just wiped Jericho off the map through their military powers, they could have easily claimed, look at what we did. But given the way God sent them in an unexpected method, when it was all said and done, they couldn't turn the tables and say, look at what we've done. All we did was march around the city and scream. I mean, to the people up on the wall, we looked like idiots. They were making fun of us. This is your idea of war? You guys are crazy. You getting your exercise. How many steps you got today, buddy? When they did it God's way, God got the glory from it. See, the benefit to doing it God's way is that it develops in me a stronger trust in God. As I experience God's work in my life, as I watch Him do the unthinkable through unexpected means, then I begin to realize I really can count on Him to lead me. It may not make sense. There may be no logic in it whatsoever, but God has a way of accomplishing things through the unexpected. Whereas the other way, if the children of Israel decided, God, we're not following it, we're going to go do this our own way, first of all, they would have met with defeat. But secondly, had there been some semblance of success found in it, they would have come out on the other side trusting more deeply in themselves. They were about to face an enemy that they had never known. They were about to face circumstances that would have been difficult had they not trusted God. God knows what we need to face in life to prepare us and equip us for what is coming later. He knows what we need to go up against. He knows the difficulties and the problems. He knows the times that we just need to be totally out of the loop as to what's happening, facing the unexpected, so that we are ready for what's coming next. Well, this brought about number 3 for your sheets. This brought about the unexpected result. The unexpected result. As I said, I believe the people of Jericho were up on the walls looking. The first day they were scared to death. The second day, maybe they were curious as to why they were walking around the city again. By the third day, it had turned ridiculous, and they just started making fun. You guys are not soldiers, are you? Is this synchronized walking? Is this an Olympic event or something? They were probably ridiculing them and poking fun in ways that the children of Israel, their pride was just getting the best of them. God, just let us go. Just let us go. But what was the end result? God's way was the best way. God's way was always the way that would bring about victory. God's way was the way that would always bring about success. The children of Israel, God knew, maybe they were not ready to do hand-to-hand combat at that time. Maybe they weren't equipped to fight off an enemy, even though they probably outnumbered them. But God's way was always best. What we'll find, if we follow God through the process of heartache, of sorrow, of difficulty, whatever's going on in your life, we follow God through that and we let Him be God, and we don't determine we're just going to abandon God's plan and go our own way. We can deal with this much better than what God's doing. We follow God through it, and we come out on the other side. We may not see it immediately, but we'll be able to eventually look back and say, God, your way was best. Your way was best. Back in the early part of the 2000s, 2001, 2002, my family, my wife, daughter, and I went through something personally, not in a relationship way, but we were just facing something that was so overwhelming. There's I shouldn't say that. Let me be honest. There's been very few times when I was as close just to giving up as I was during that time. It was one of those things that cost us sleep. It was just hard. Hey, you face stuff like that, right? It was just hard. But now, 20 years later, I can look back on it. After having said while going through it, I would never go through this again. I can look back on it and say, you know what? If that's the only way God could teach me what He taught me, I would gladly go through it again. Because I've seen the way God grew us, the way God made our family even closer. I mean, not only my wife and daughter and I, but our extended family. We were gathering to pray. I mean, this was a big deal. This was really hurtful. God was just knitting us together. God was growing and preparing me for things that would happen in the future. We don't always like what God allows us to go through, but we can always be certain that whatever it is, God knows what's best for us. Always has, always will. And He's promised for those who love Him to always do what's best for us. Always. So then, given that information, doesn't it make sense that we would just stop and say, okay, God, I do trust you. Even as you told Joshua in chapter 1, you've told us in the New Testament, you will never leave us, you will never forsake us. I have no reason to doubt that even though I'm in a time of difficulty and heartache, that you've abandoned me. I have no reason to think that whatsoever. And I believe that what you're doing is somehow going to turn out exactly the way you want it to. Exactly the way that will bring you the most glory, and exactly the way that's going to be best for me and my family. And therefore, God, you do what you need to. I'm just going to trust and follow you. So what is it that you're facing right now? What is it that you're going through right now? Will you just surrender that to God? Would you just turn it over to Him and say, God, I'm following you regardless of where this leads? And will you wait and see that the results are worth the trust? They always are when we follow God.